You knew before you knew, and you talked yourself out of it. 6 months before the evidence appeared. No proof, no logic, no explanation. Just a shift in how the air felt when they entered the room. A change in the frequency of their laugh. The way they started saying your name differently, like a question instead of a statement. The mind said paranoid. Therapy for trust issues followed. Books on attachment anxiety. Apologies for being suspicious. Self-gaslighting so thorough that when truth finally surfaced, the first thought wasn't shock. It was relief. Relief at not being crazy. That the knowing had been right all along. This is what knowing looks like before it can explain itself. And every time you ignored it, you paid for it. Your body registers truth before thought can form. That smile feeling 1 degree too sharp. The sudden certainty before bad news arrives. The almost imperceptible recognition when meeting someone who will later reveal themselves as unsafe. These aren't random reactions. They're intelligence operating at a bandwidth consciousness can't access. Your body processes 11 million bits per second below awareness. Your conscious mind processes 40. Knowing isn't guessing. It's computing with more data than thoughts could ever consciously hold. Yet the 40 gets worshipped while the 11 million gets dismissed. The droplet trusted while the ocean is ignored. Instinct demanded to explain itself in words it doesn't speak. Your body has been reading the world since before you learned language. It hears what words can't carry, decodes micro-expressions, temperature shifts, silences between sentences. While the mind writes stories, the gut writes truth in sensations. And it has a perfect record. That person who made your skin crawl at the company party while everyone else found them charming. 6 months later, the scandal broke exactly as your body predicted. The investment that looked perfect on paper but made your stomach turn. You didn't take it, and the market proved you right. The relationship where everything seemed fine except that persistent unease you couldn't name. When the truth emerged, it wore exactly the mask your body recognized from the beginning. You've felt this in job interviews when you knew within seconds it wasn't right, even though they said all the right things. In apartments you walked through, knowing instantly this wasn't home, though it checked every box on your list. In conversations where someone's words were perfect, but something in their rhythm felt rehearsed. Your conscious mind was still gathering data. Your body had already filed its report. Rumi said, "There is a voice that doesn't use words. Listen." He didn't say it as metaphor. He said it as truth. This knowing is older than language, lives in the same place as the silence birds fall into before earthquakes, the way animals flee hours before tsunamis, the shift in air pressure before storms. This ancient intelligence doesn't speak in words, but in certainty. The kind that doesn't need evidence because it is the evidence. Every single ancestor survived because they trusted feelings they couldn't explain. The mother who fled before the raid, following nothing but a chill. The hunter who chose the other path, guided only by unease. The child who refused the stranger, not from logic, but from knowing. The ones who needed proof didn't make it. The ones who demanded their instincts make sense to committee aren't in anyone's bloodline. You exist because thousands of generations trusted the knowing that came before thought. Their instinct is your inheritance, not a skill to develop, not a gift some have and others don't. A survival system refined over millions of years, encoded in your cells, running every second, and you've been taught to apologize for it. Your gut brain contains 500 million neurons, more than the spinal cord, not just digesting food, digesting reality, reading patterns, threats, and opportunities faster than thought can begin. When gut feelings arrive, they're not superstition. They're sophisticated pattern recognition systems operating below the threshold of consciousness. And you've been taught to treat them like noise. But culture worships the explainable and dismisses the felt, values the proven over the perceived, trusts spreadsheets over sensation. So we scroll, we analyze, we wait for someone else to say it's real before we let ourselves believe what we already know. We hand our knowing over to algorithms and experts. We label what can't be quantified as unreliable, forgetting that the deepest truths rarely shout. They hum, they whisper, and they wait for the moment you stop drowning them in noise. The last time you didn't listen, not the story you tell about it, but the actual moment. That internal no overridden with logic. The voice saying leave, while thoughts said, don't be ridiculous. The knowing saying danger, while the mind said, stop being dramatic. And then it happened. Exactly as sensed, not from being psychic, from receiving signals consciousness hasn't learned to decode. Because survival has always depended on recognition before proof can be assembled. That certainty about someone everyone else loved, dismissed, called paranoid. Months later, when the mask slipped, the first thought wasn't surprise. It was that awful, familiar recognition. I knew. I always knew. Or that sudden leaving. No reason you could name, just needed to go. Finding out later what arrived 20 minutes after you left. The conflict that erupted, the situation that would have trapped you. Something in you had computed what your mind couldn't see. Your gut doesn't arrive in words. It arrives in certainty. That contraction when someone lies. That expansion when something aligns. That sudden need to step back. That inexplicable pull forward. These aren't random. They're intelligence communicating in its native language. The language of knowing without naming. But here's where it gets complicated, because trauma can masquerade as intuition. Anxiety can feel like gut knowing. Old wounds can scream warnings about dangers that aren't there. True knowing arrives clean, knows without emotion, states without story, warns without panic, says leave without adding catastrophe, says yes without requiring justification. Lands like a bell struck once. Clear, resonant, simple. Anxiety spirals, catastrophizes, creates stories within stories. Doesn't just say leave. It says leave, because what if this and then that, and remember when, and everything will fall apart. The spiral is the tell. Knowing doesn't spiral. It simply knows. Trauma speaks in chemistry. That electric charge with someone new might not be attraction. It might be your body recognizing familiar dysfunction. The person who feels like home might feel that way because they recreate your original wounds. You keep choosing the same emotional profile, calling it chemistry when it's trauma bonding. Each time convinced this is different. Each time the same architecture wearing a new face. The charge wasn't attraction to something good. It was recognition of something known. And once you see the pattern, the distinction becomes possible. Real attraction feels different, calmer, clearer, safer. Not the electrical storm of trauma bonding, but the quiet warmth of actual connection. Your knowing was accurate all along. You'd just been misreading its signals. The most dangerous people in your life need you to doubt your instincts. They benefit from your self-gaslighting. They consistently say too sensitive, too paranoid, too much, specifically when your knowing warns you about them. They recognize that your instincts see through them. Your doubt is their protection. Watch what happens when you start trusting your knowing around these people. They escalate. They argue. They bring in others to confirm you're wrong. They create elaborate explanations for why your sensing is invalid. The intensity of their reaction tells you everything. People unthreatened by your knowing don't need to demolish it. Your body keeps receipts for every self-betrayal. Every override of knowing creates fractures in self-trust. Every "stop being dramatic" you told yourself drove the wedge deeper between you and your own intelligence. Until one day you realized you were living entirely by logic, while your knowing had been screaming directions you'd trained yourself not to hear. And here's the part no one prepares you for. When you start trusting your gut again after years of overriding it, the first thing that happens isn't clarity, it's grief. Grief for every time you were right and didn't listen. Every relationship you stayed in 6 months past the knowing. Every job you took when your stomach said no. Every room you walked into when your body was already walking out. You start counting the cost, not in money or time, but in self-trust. And you realize the real damage wasn't what they did to you. It was what you did to yourself by not listening to the part of you that knew. The body doesn't give up. It escalates. First, it whispers. The unease you brush off, the tightness you attribute to stress, the Sunday night dread you've normalized. Then it speaks. The headaches that arrive on schedule, the stomach problems no diet fixes, the back pain no stretching releases. Then it shouts. The panic attack in the parking lot, the immune system that collapses, the body that simply stops cooperating with a life it never agreed to. Your body isn't malfunctioning, it's protesting. The whisper was a courtesy. The shout is a demand. Only humans argue with their own survival intelligence. The deer doesn't need peer review to run. The bird doesn't require consensus to migrate. The wolf doesn't doubt its knowing. Only humans demand their instincts present a dissertation before acting. Something shifts when you stop arguing with your own knowing, not dramatically, quietly. You start making decisions faster, not because you've become impulsive, but because you've stopped requiring your body to submit a formal proposal to your mind before you're allowed to act. You start leaving rooms sooner, staying in conversations less, saying no without the paragraph of justification you used to attach to protect other people from your boundaries. People notice. Some of them don't like it. The ones who benefited from your self-doubt start calling you cold, closed off, different. Because you are different. You're no longer available to be talked out of what you know, no longer willing to override your 11 million bits because someone else's 40 have a more convincing argument. And the strangest part, your body starts to relax. The tension you thought was permanent begins to release. The sleep improves. The headaches thin out. Not because the world got safer, but because you stopped fighting the one system that was actually keeping you safe. And here's the other side nobody talks about. When you start trusting your knowing, You also start recognizing safety with the same precision you recognize danger. The person whose presence your shoulders drop around without you deciding to relax. The room where your breathing changes before you've consciously registered why. The conversation where you suddenly say something you didn't plan to say. Not because you lost control, but because your body felt safe enough to stop editing. You've been so focused on what your gut warns you about that you've missed what it's been pointing you toward. It doesn't just detect threat, it detects home. And it's been trying to show you both for your entire life. Feel what happens right now, not in your head, lower, in the place where breath meets belly, in the space behind your ribs where something tightens when you're lying to yourself and loosens when you stop. Something in you has been listening to these words differently than your mind has. Something older, something that doesn't need to agree or disagree. It just knows whether what it's hearing is true. And right now, that something is either opening or closing, softening or bracing. Moving toward these words or pulling away. Don't name it. Don't analyze it. Just feel it. That sensation, whatever it is the 11 million speaking. Not about this. About everything. About the life you're living and the one you're not. About the person you're becoming and the one you've been performing. About what needs to stay and what's already gone. It's all there in that single sensation, compressed into a feeling your mind will spend weeks trying to translate into language that can only hold a fraction of what your body just said in a breath. This is what your knowing feels like when you finally stop asking it to explain itself. Not peace, not calm. Something more alive than either. Something that moves through your chest like weather. Grief and recognition and relief arriving in the same wave. Your eyes sting, and you don't know why. Your throat tightens around something that isn't sadness, but isn't joy either. It's the feeling of being met, of something outside you, finally matching the frequency of something you've been carrying alone so long, you forgot it was heavy. The mind calls that being emotional. The body calls it coming home. There's a specific loneliness in this. The loneliness of knowing something you can't prove, of feeling the wrongness in a room full of people who feel nothing, of sensing the lie inside words everyone else accepts. You wonder if something is broken in you, if you're the one who's wrong, the one who's too much. It's not. Your nervous system is the most calibrated thing about you. It's the 40 bits that are struggling to keep up. Modern life teaches distrust of this inheritance. The therapist saying overreaction when your knowing screams danger. Friends saying too picky when your gut says wrong fit. Family insisting they know best while your whole system says no. They don't have your 11 million bits. They don't have your pattern recognition. They can offer perspective. They can't offer your truth. Rebuilding that trust is slower than you want it to be. You don't just flip a switch and start hearing your gut clearly again. At first, it feels like trying to hear a voice in a room you've been filling with noise for decades. The signal is still there. It never left. But you've built so many layers of logic and rationalization and other people's opinions on top of it that the first few times you try to listen, you're not sure if what you're hearing is knowing or just another thought pretending to be instinct. So you start small. You notice the contraction before you override it. You feel the expansion before you explain it away. You pause before saying yes when your body already said no. And slowly, not all at once, not dramatically, the signal gets louder. Not because it changed, because you stopped drowning it out. There's someone in your life right now your knowing has already assessed, a situation your body has already voted on, a decision your deepest intelligence has already made. You know what it's telling you. You've always known. Your knowing doesn't rush, moves like water, revealing in its own time. Truth settles, lies agitate. This discernment has always been present. Doesn't need earning, proving, or explaining. Only needs acknowledging. The best decisions you've ever made didn't happen when they looked good on paper. They arrived when thinking exhausted itself. In showers when you suddenly knew what to do. Half asleep when answers arrived complete. Walking when you turned towards solutions your mind hadn't considered. These weren't random. They're what happens when conscious interference stops jamming the signal, when the droplet stops drowning out the ocean, when deeper intelligence finally has space to deliver what it's been computing all along. Your body has been waiting for this, not waiting the way your mind waits, anxiously, impatiently, with a timeline and a deadline. Waiting the way roots wait for rain, without resentment, without keeping score, just ready. Ready the moment you're ready. Ready the moment you stop asking it to prove what it knows and start letting it guide you toward what's yours. One day, without fanfare, it returns. A shift too quiet to name, but too true to ignore. No proving it, no explaining it. Just knowing, and that being enough. The question was never whether to trust your knowing. The question is what happens now that you remember you always did.